Hey everyone. Just as we'll wait a minute or so for everybody else to join, but there's a chat box there where we would ask you throughout if you've got questions for either myself or Josh, the other presenter. Feel free to pop it in there. But just as we wait for others to join in the next minute or so, we'd love to hear where people are dialing in from. I'm actually up nice and early Friday morning in out of Sydney, Australia. I don't know, Josh, you're on another continent hemisphere, but where's everybody else calling in from?
Yeah, I'm over here in sunny Los Angeles right now.
Very good. Cool. Hey, Ali. Yeah, I've actually got much warmer everything on right now from Boston. Hey, Jennifer.
Indiana.
Bill, it's winter at the moment, but yeah, it's still pretty nice. We're still in shorts every day.
Isn't that's really more the Aussie uniform though, is it not? Right?
Say that again.
Isn't that more the Aussie uniform? You got shorts
Pretty much, yeah.
And the flip-flops.
Business up top, party down the bottom. That's us.
Yeah, that tracks.
Year round, yeah. Nice. Hey, Richard. All right, guys, we've got loads more registered for this. We'll kick it on. We want to be respectful of everyone's time and also make sure that there is time for questions and et cetera at the end if there's been plenty that have been added in. But this has been one of the more excitable or best feedback that we've received from a topic that we want to present on. And it really makes sense. Like everybody on this call, and no doubt that's registered and is interested in it, the amount of time and effort and expertise that you have wrapped into Microsoft, it's like we're so deep in that world. How can we make more out of that investment and relationship that you have? So there's going to be some new information. There's going to be no doubt some information that you're probably aware of, but it's good to rehash and rehear. But in terms of who's speaking today, so my name is Adam Ross. I'm the co-founder of a company called CloudOlive. And my background was working at an MSP very early out of university. And we used to invoice our customers incorrectly and found it very difficult to just give our clients the information of what they're buying from us. Okay, so I then joined a company called Autotask, which you would think I joined because I thought, well, if our MSP had a single system that ran the entire life cycle of our end client, we wouldn't have had this issue. Lo and behold, I was there for almost a decade and that problem didn't go away. And that's actually what, during different acquisitions and mergers and stuff, Josh and I actually started working with each other at that point. But we set up CloudOlive 4.5 years ago to try and solve the broad spectrum problem of, can we help MSPs not underbill their customers? Okay, so Josh, I'll let you introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. My name's Josh Rakoke. I'm the VP for North America over here at Inforcer. And as Adam mentioned, I've worked with him in the past at Autotask, and then of course Datto bought Autotask, and then another company bought them, and the circle of life continues. But now I've been in the MSP space for something around 17 years now. I actually started my career as one of the I think my employee number was still 2 digits at Kaseya pre-private equity, so I spent about 7 years there. Wearing a number of different hats, but my sort of core focus has always been around automation, even prior to the MSP space when I worked in government and enterprise. Anything that a human can do that's repetitive, let's do that with software, right? So there's a lot of focus on standardization, on automation, process management, and we'll go into a couple of those things as well. But actually, we'll get into Inforcer in a little bit more detail later. But we were built to solve the problem of how the heck do you actually manage Microsoft 365 in a multi-tenant setting at scale? And we've got some pretty clever ways that I think that we address that, and we'll be talking about them.
Yeah, very good. And one of the big reasons why we wanted to run this with the Inforcer team is like, we're reconciling their data, right? So we're seeing this growth. We're seeing really, really good feedback from joint partners of ours. And yeah, great to share the stage with you, Josh, no doubt. So let's kick it off into the flow today. Joshua is going to talk through some of the insights that we're seeing and where there's some awesome tailwinds that's working in your favor for those who are heavily invested in Microsoft now and will be in the future. Just some ideas of how you can leverage more. Like we touched on the expertise that underpins every person on this call around Microsoft. There's other ways that you can be generating mutual value with your clients and joining in the revenue share with that. Then we'll come into something that's really, really close at heart for myself is like pricing strategies, making sure that you're making the right amount of revenue based on the value that you're actually producing. And it doesn't always just fall under, should we just charge the RRP? We're also going to see some billing blind spots, some things that we see every single day, every single month with every single MSP that we work with. How can we stop all revenue leakage? Okay, we're obviously going to focus more on Microsoft now, some very specific examples, but it does blend across any of the vendors. And also on the other side, if you stop revenue leakage, problem number one, are your customers still asking you billing queries at the end of each month? And if they are, completely different problem area. And there's a different solution to that we'll also talk through how you can think about that in a scalable manner. So just to give you an idea of why we're talking about this area, sort of our expertise in this space. So as I mentioned, we've been going very deep in this world. I suppose we've been sort of looking at this problem area for near on 15 years now, but we set out to solve it about 4.5. So you see the CloudOlive logo in the middle on the left-hand side. It's between any of your suppliers, any of them. There's over 150 that we now do on a monthly basis for our partners, as well as different reports and BI layer, et cetera, whatever they can extract out. And then it's our responsibility to ensure that your Autotask PSA or your ConnectWise managed PSA is accurate. And if it's not, you can then make some considerations. Should we change it? Should we just track it? Is it an error from an offboarding perspective? Whatever that is. Our job is to give you really hard to find information at the most granular level. And then you can just use that information however you want to drive your business. Okay. So on the other side of it is, and we'll give you a couple of almost like thank yous for being and taking the time out today, but there's a couple of links that we'll share later on. One's going to be a dashboard that sits on top of either Autotask or ConnectWise, which is a read of all of your billing items with some really, really handy features such as filtering and searching and also the ability to group different services together. It's really, really cool. We'll show you some of that information around what problems it can solve. And the other piece towards the end of it is just for saying thanks. I would love to do an audit if it's a problem you've got, of course. Would love to take any of your distributors that you buy Microsoft from, and we'll just give you confidence that everything's spot on. Okay, down to the margin on an individual subscription, right the way back up to everything's getting on bill.
Yeah. So a little bit about us and what we do. As I mentioned, we came about as a solution to try to address the problem of how on earth do you manage multiple tenants within Microsoft's ever-growing 365 environment. And one of the challenges that a lot of you have as MSPs is Microsoft has these incredible tools. They're immensely powerful. There's so much that you can do with them, but boy, they don't really give you a great way to actually administer them, and certainly not across multiple tenants simultaneously. And the other challenge that you run into is that they're large, they're extremely complex, and Microsoft is making changes to those things all the time, right? They're building the plane as it is taking off. And anyone who's spent any time actually working within a tenant knows that, sometimes you wake up Monday morning, you have your coffee, you go and you look at that tenant, and there's changes you didn't make, change nobody in your organization made. They're changes that Microsoft made. This is where this setting is going to be buried. This is what we're calling it. Here's this new functionality we've added. Here's this functionality we've removed, and so on. So it's a really, really difficult problem for you guys to be solving. So fundamentally what we do, the name Inforcer actually came out because we started working first with Intune before adding things like Defender and Entra ID. So Intune, enforcement, Inforcer. Also, the domain was available. So what are you going to do? Anyway, the thing that I like to kind of hit on is a piece of advice that I was given very, very early in my career was regarding investment in your business. Anytime you are making some type of investment, be that in personnel, be that in tooling, whatever, you should consider that it needs to either increase revenue, decrease costs, or mitigate risk. Or the way that it was said to me was make money, save money, and stay out of jail. So Enforcer tackles all three of those things. And we'll get into some examples here as we go through the webinar, but we allow you to increase your efficiency by making setting up new tenants incredibly fast and a carbon copy of your ideal state. We then track those things on an ongoing basis and allow you to manage all of that configuration drift across all of your different tenants, be it from Microsoft or from somebody in there actually intentionally making changes, and increase the compliance. And then further mitigating the risk by helping you to lock down those tenants appropriately in a way that people are still able to get their work done, to mitigate the risk, reduce the attack surface, bring everything into one house as well. So we'll give you some concrete examples there.
Yeah, very good. So, Josh, why don't you talk us through some of the trends that you're seeing? Because these are pretty impressive numbers, especially around the markets that we've all got very good presence in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Microsoft 365 is the standard, right? I don't know too many people in the MSP space, serving small businesses right now that are trying to, spin up a new customer with, oh, right, well, let's get Exchange in there and I'm going to set up a SharePoint server. It doesn't make sense. Everybody is moving to 365. They're either there right now or they're going there in some way or another. So if you look at the actual numbers coming out of Microsoft, they've got something like 345 million users and growing around the globe. And here in North America, where I sit, roughly 34% of those users are located. So in USA specifically, that's not even counting Canada and Mexico. And that equates to about 117 million individual users. And that number is obviously increasing every single day. So it's a massive addressable market for you guys. It's in addition to being a massive addressable market, it's also a massively complex thing for you to administer properly. And the other thing to think about, and I'll talk about this a little bit more in the next slide, but it's very much a commodity product. So you need to be thinking of ways that you are actually able to differentiate yourself. And we'll talk a bit more about things that help MSPs to stand apart. But the one graph on here I really like to talk about actually is the Teams versus Slack adoption. And actually, Adam has a really interesting story about this. You were telling me about this the other day when you were founding CloudOlive. Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, we launched as COVID was hitting, and I saw this picture on the right hand side at that time, and I dropped it into a group chat, and there was a whole heap of other founders of software companies like, guys, look at this for product market fit. And somebody actually wrote back and said, no, that's product market steal. And 4 years later, it sort of stuck with me, that slide. And I just thought, and Microsoft in their business strategy is just so dominant in everything. And then about 2 weeks ago, because Salesforce then eventually acquired Slack for 26, I think it was, $1 billion, but Microsoft now have got a slap on the wrist around anti-competitive behavior, and they've sort of been doing it for many, many, many decades and doing it better than anybody else. Is it right? Is it wrong? It's not for, I suppose, for myself to suggest that, but what it does show is that the Microsoft brand, the R&D, the investment that they put in, they're just going to continue to completely dominate, providing they're bringing out good products. And Teams is just a great example. At the right time was the right product, and I've been amazed. All our MSP partners use it. We should probably use it. Apologies for running this on Zoom, everyone. But it just shows the additional tailwinds that, like, the MSPs on this call are the ones that are driving that adoption on the behalf of Microsoft and the stickiness. So yeah, product market steal, that one there, Josh.
Yeah, I'm going to steal that phrasing actually. But the thing that I think is really, really interesting about that, when you look at what's actually happening between Teams and Slack, is look through the history of Microsoft, right? This is not a new story. They've been doing this forever, just like you were saying, Adam. And I run into a lot of MSPs that they'll be a bit precious about certain products that they have, and this is the greatest thing since ice cream or whatever it is, and we would never change away from it. When there is a product within the business premium license, for example, like Teams, that solves that exact same problem that they're using that other product for. And we'll talk about how you can kind of use that, use the existing spend within Microsoft to increase your stickiness and so on. But the larger point I want to make here is that there is an absolute graveyard of companies that have fallen to Microsoft when they put their sights on a particular market. I can think of maybe 2 places where they tried and failed. That's mobile and then browsers in the late 90s, right? Or early 2000s. When they are coming after a particular product, be it a security product, a collaboration tool, etc., they generally win. So you can either fight the tide or you can surf it. The smart MSPs are the ones that are going to surf that and bring it all in-house. So good, bad, or otherwise, that's the story.
That's it.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. I talked to a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of MSPs over the years that talk about the challenges that they have in selling security to the SMBs, right? I'm sure everybody on this call can relate to that in some form or another, where my customers don't want to pay for it. My customers don't like the idea of working, for example, with MFA. Or the real common refrain is, we're too small, right? I'm a local insurance office. Nobody's coming after me, which is just fundamentally not true, as I'm sure most of us here know, right? They are a target because they are small, right? If they're a criminal and they're looking to do a robbery, they're probably going to have a lot more success burglarizing houses than they are robbing banks, because the bank's a bigger target and it's got a lot more security, as opposed to, I almost never lock my doors around here, but that's a different story. Anyway, the point is the things that are actually starting to get the attention of the SMBs are government. So government's pushing a lot of different standards, saying you need to take this stuff very, very seriously. There have been some extremely high-profile breaches, zero-day exploits, and so forth over the last few years that are causing a lot more people to wake up to the reality of the situation that's always been there. But then the other one is money. Oftentimes, the thing that is driving the adoption from the SMBs is they are getting their renewal quotes from their cyber insurance providers, and suddenly it's 2x, 3x the premiums if you haven't done this, and this. And so they're coming back to a lot of the MSPs saying, well, why aren't we doing this? I need to do this. And it's because, they've got a big bill, and now they're starting to understand kind of the scope of what that threat actually looks like.
Yeah, and this is, although this is localized to Australia, this is actually an initiative that the Australian government, I suspect that there's going to be something similar needing to be rolled out. I always find that in Australia and New Zealand in particular, they're on their own, so they have to figure a lot of things out on their own. And this is a great initiative that's a lot of the MSPs down here are beginning to wrap their arms around and push this message. But I see it almost like the business continuity explosion that happened almost a decade ago now, that there was a difficult conversation, then became a very easy conversation for a period of time. And these mandates coming from the government and expectations, and as Joshua said, around cyber insurance in particular, it's going to elevate the conversation. So again, the earlier that you can be having structured conversations with existing and net new clients, if they are sort of on the fence about sort of securing themselves, at some point there'll be a tipping point, and it doesn't feel like it's a million miles away at all. And Josh, you want to talk through some of this as well? I think you've
Yeah,
been.
actually, so going back to the idea of government pushing a lot more of this, right? You see this within the U.S. market as well as our federal government and even state governments also saying, these are standards you need to be thinking about. There are a number of guidelines and so on, but I've actually have stolen and reused the Essential 8 from the Aussie government. I've always loved working in the Australia New Zealand market because Adam, you guys tend to be incredibly direct and you don't waste a lot of time, right? And I think Essential 8 is a really good example of that, where it just boils down. These are the simple things that you need to be focused on categorically. And obviously it goes into a bit more detail, but you can have an easy conversation with somebody who is not an IT specialist about why these things are important, right? I don't want to say dumb it down, but we approach our message to the audience that we are attempting to communicate. So if I'm speaking to an attorney or a doctor or just a run-of-the-mill small business owner, a flower shop, whatever it is, I can talk to them. I can have an easy conversation, say, hey, look, these are the things that are already being addressed by the government. So you need to be looking at patching the applications and the operating system, restricting administrative privileges, so on and so forth. And it's interesting here is if you'll notice the third from the bottom, restrict Microsoft Office macros. When the government standards are explicitly naming a vendor and something to do there, I think that tells you to kind of wake up and take that seriously if you're using that vendor's product. I said that it looks like we have a comment that the EU directive NIS2 will become law in many European countries. Yeah, I'm glad you actually brought that up because that's one of the areas that we here at Enforcer have been investing a lot of time in regarding our policies and baselines and so forth to make that easier for you to meet those standards. So things to think about, things for you to kind of have those conversations with your clients because if you aren't, somebody else is, and the insurers and the governments are beating this drum quite loudly, and it's only going to continue to get louder.
And Josh, just to add to this, right? I remember seeing this. This was branded so hard across all the different publications in the MSP space, in particular. Probably in 2018, the Essential 8, I think it was about that time anyway, came out and it was everywhere. So it's been out for quite some time down here in Australia, and the wording has been refined. But the fact that they single out Microsoft as the single application company product that's just so widespread across companies in general, it really sings to the tune that jumping on the Microsoft bandwagon a little bit more is not it's sort of all a rising tide floats all boats type of analogy. But we can share some of the Essential 8 information. It may obviously the names, etc., but the structure and the framework from a conversation perspective, the government, I think, did a pretty good job down here in making it simple, making it something that non-IT speaking people would be able to resonate with and be able to have easy conversations within their own companies as well. So this has now begun to evolve even further with the new attacks, new everything else. But from a structural standpoint, this is still very much spoken about down here on a near daily basis.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's, not to spend too much time on it, but like it's a place to start, right? There are a lot of MSPs that will have conversations around those kind of simple concepts as identified by Essential 8, but internally they are aligned to something like CIS or NIS2 or something else along those lines. The end customer doesn't necessarily need all of that level of detail because it might not be particularly serving to them. It may be a bit more confusing. I want to talk about this slide here real quickly because, business premium, I'm long of the opinion that that's probably one of the best values in terms of business software that's out there right now. Even here at Enforcer, where we live and breathe this stuff, I still find things on almost a weekly basis. It's like, oh, I didn't realize we could do that, and it more tightly integrates our different processes and so forth. But this slide specifically, we're looking at Defender, right? And it's interesting that Defender, when it first came out, it had I'll say deserved, not great reputation. That was a very long time ago, and it has since become a leading product in that space. And if you take a look there at the Gartner Magic Quadrant and direct your attention to the fun square, the top right, there's Microsoft as both a visionary and a leader in the space. And I read a stat somewhat recently that Microsoft spends more on R&D on Defender than a handful of those other vendors have in combined revenue annually. It's nuts. It's in the billions. So, it's become an extremely mature product, and it's already there within Business Premium. You have an excellent opportunity as MSPs to begin building your management around that. And going back to the slide where we talked about the difference between Slack and Teams, this is another product in that space where Microsoft has set its sights. They are investing billions annually, and there's going to be more bodies in that graveyard. And I don't want to pick on one particular vendor who happens to be at the very, very tippy top right and having an unbelievably bad week and a half or so here. But that's a really good example where you have some of these kind of like, I don't want to diminish the products, but there's a bit of a flavor of the week element to it, right? Like Slack, right? Or some of the others that shall go unnamed, where people will say, well, this is the end all be all. And so they go all in on those tools. And then, 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, there's something else and they end up switching. And fundamentally, what those people are doing is managing tools, and they're maybe not as focused as they should be on how do those tools facilitate a particular service that I'm actually providing to my clients, because that's fundamentally what it is that they're buying. So there's a lot of things that are already there within Microsoft that you can start pushing out there and recapture a lot of that revenue that you're otherwise spending on these tools. And so you look at some of these situations where I spoke to somebody recently that was spending something like $11,000, $12,000 per month on third-party security tools before they moved over to managing Defender with Enforcer. $10,000, $11,000, $12,000, that's not a small amount of money. I mean, what can you do with that cash? You can hire another person, you can invest that in the business, you put it in your pocket. Like it's real cash. There's real opportunity here to start using what you're already paying for to deliver the services you're already selling. So one of the challenges that you guys face, right? Like, why is it that you're not using more within the Microsoft stack? Well, it's complex. Like we talked about this at the beginning. It's a big animal and it is moving. It's hard to get the level of expertise that you need to manage all elements of 365, and it's certainly difficult to do that at scale across all of your customers. So that's very much where we come in. Part of what we do is obviously increase our standardization across all of those tenants. So we have a baseline. You can create your own custom baselines, obviously, but we've done a lot of the heavy lifting for you in creating these security policies aligned to the CIS controls that allow you to jump in with both feet on day one, push that stuff out to your clients, standardize it, have it properly documented, even if you don't have a high level of expertise within 365. You're still learning, right? And then obviously the process of automating that on an ongoing basis, tracking those different changes and so forth. And I have some screenshots. We'll show you a lot of what that looks like. But fundamentally, that all kind of boils down to decreasing the overall cost of service delivery. We can talk about a little bit more about increasing your revenue, and we've kind of hit on mitigating risk, but driving down the cost from a labor perspective to actually deploy these tenants and then to manage them on an ongoing basis. And I think, Adam, you actually had some real good stuff to talk about with respect to cost management and how you're actually billing and tracking all that stuff.
For sure. And I think I'm just coming back down to standardization, just to pick on that point. Like whenever we sync a new PSA, be that AuditTask or ConnectWise, and we look at the naming conventions that have been provided or that have been built up, so product IDs in ConnectWise, service IDs, service names in AuditTask, we should have a really good pulse on whether or not this is going to be a clean environment, this is going to be a simple implementation, and we got an idea immediately of what it's like for your admin and finance teams for a month-end billing process, literally down to the naming conventions. And when it comes to Microsoft, like NCE came around, 3.5, 4 years ago, and it was just like, oh my God, look at all these changes, commits and 3 year and 1 year and monthlies and every combination in between. And it's meant to start at this time, but it got pushed down. And like what that left was a very, very difficult problem to solve in terms of how do we actually build up our PSA, our invoicing system to ensure that it's scalable into the future. And one of the really, really common things that we try to help with and just guide on is picking a structured naming convention that means you don't need to re-engineer it every 6 months or 12, or just know that it's a headache in the future. You know you need to get to. There's some considerations, and I'll share an example later on of what we mean around that. And the whole idea is not necessarily taking the code from Pax8 or the code from Ingram or the code from whoever, because if you ever move distributors at that point in time, those codes, those IDs is so foreign. And even if to the point of different billing frequencies often have the same code, because that's how Microsoft do it. So it adds these other layers, especially if you're buying monthlies, annuals, and annuals as an example of the same subscription from your distributor or even direct from Microsoft. The naming convention inside your PSA or whatever system you're billing out of is crucial. So important. I think that not enough emphasis is put on initially. And again, I spent 10 years working at Auditask, selling Auditask, knowing that product back to front, inside out. And when the contracts module or agreements module for ConnectWise, same is set up well, those systems are awesome. When they're not, they're heavy, they're clunky, you move to something else and have a similar problem. A lot of it is solved based on just having a structured, standardized naming convention. And then when it comes into the cost management and optimizing, again, it's really a decision point it's a binary decision point at some point in time. Do you want your customers to see one line item and everything's bundled in? Or do you want to see, do you want to show everything to your clients? Like, that's a decision point that every MSP makes. And again, they often think, oh, I'm thinking about moving to bundles, or we're now unbundling things. Like that's a decision point that needs to be made. It's will absolutely need to be decided upon. But it also then leads into the complexity that you have moving forward. So if you have one line item to your client, maybe easy to bill out, really difficult then to track the actual cost against it. Our belief is you need to understand profitability at an end client level, at a product service level, so then you can make the right decisions. If you've got one line item, it's great from maybe a selling perspective. It's great from how customers are paying our bills. It's really hard to know if you've actually deployed those things. It's really hard to know if you've actually billed, or if you've got far too many or far few services still switched on in the portal. So our belief is you need to solve it all. And as we work through to productization and delivering on scale, naming conventions is so important. And the next one I think is, we talk about this every day, pretty much on every single demonstration and meeting that we have. It's like, how can we help you understand the source of truth from account perspective that everybody in your business, everybody in your orbit, including your clients, including the reps, including admin, including management, that can we define a source of truth of which everybody is on the same language? Okay, so we look at best of breed. We'll focus in around Microsoft here, but again, it does blend into all the other products that you sell and services. Thinking about the problem you may have. So if you think month-end billing or you're invoicing a cloud services is like, oh, it's such a fragmented sort of, it's not a great process for the team. It may be that you're concerned about leaking revenue from your business, okay? And if anybody on here going, oh, we've got a scenario where we didn't build something for 7 months or 2 months or 4 months. Like, we've had a domain that wasn't built for 5 years that we saw. It was a domain, right? But it's $20 times by 12 times by 5. It all adds up, and it's pure cash flow that you're leaving on the table. The next is the end client source of truth. So solving revenue leakage will not always solve having the clients then come back and say, hey, why are you billing me of 12 of these and we've got 10 business premium as an example? Okay. Next one around charging your correct value, and then leveraging value adds. Once you've got this process down pat, scalable, everyone knows what the different departments are doing and expecting, including the clients, and then just going back and having conversations where you can build so much more value for the partners. And Inforcer is an example of that, a very good, growing fast example that should be considered. So source of truth, revenue leakage. Just want to give you some real numbers here. So if you've got cost of $10 and you're making 16% margin, your profit on that, and again, this is margin, not markup. We're working off margin here, but it's the same sort of dynamics from a monthly perspective. If you miss 1 month of that, okay, 1 month, it then takes 6 months of getting it right to recoup that margin again. Okay, and 16% is a very fair margin around Microsoft, give or take, right? 1 or 2%, 1 or 2%. the other piece of that is more subtle, okay, more subtle to consider. Think about the naming convention again that we talked about. What happens if you're buying a monthly, but selling it as a monthly annual, okay? There's a 20% swing in that. All of a sudden, you're making roughly 4% negative margin on that. Not ideal, right? And these are the subtleties that when you're scaling, they're really hard to find, really hard to find. And especially when new price increases come in every 6 to 12 months now with Microsoft again, it's really difficult to identify these. Regardless of where or who you're buying it from or how you're syncing it through, regardless of that, having extra oversight to just understand whether or not things haven't drift at all, or more extreme is something's not getting billed at all. And I'm sure everybody here has some examples, plural, where this is taken. So from a revenue leakage perspective, it's key that you use the data coming from the portals of all of your vendors. Ideally, an invoice. The invoice is the amount of money leaving your bank, of course. So having that tied back to what is going through your business will stop the revenue leakage problem. Simple as that. It has to be that. It has to be the deployed count, the invoice amount. It has to be that data that you're comparing to make sure that everything's in alignment. Okay. And we see in general, if you've got 100 line items, and this scales very linear, in a very linear fashion, if you've got 100 line items that you're reselling on a monthly basis, so the number of line items that are on, like, going to customers, for every 100 line items that you're doing in a manual fashion, we expect 7 of those in the vendor portal to not even be inside your PSA. And that's been the same numbers we expect that from day dot 4+ years ago, small, medium, or large. And it's oftentimes it's often a customer's called in, they've ended a subscription on something, maybe started something else, and been switched off in the PSA. Cool, customer's happy, but it's never been switched off in the vendor portal. All these things in the first true up is super important, and how that translate into scale, right? These are some real examples. And if you sit somewhere in the middle, you can sort of just get an idea of, if you've got, say, $10,000 of vendor costs, there's highly likely per month, there's highly likely somewhere between 500 and 700 extra cash flow per month that is getting missed out on from a number of different, like, optimization, very simple optimization strategies. Again, we need to take vendor data and initially do that true up, just understand what's going on. And again, if we can show underbilling and overbilling per supplier per month, see this information, track it. And again, there's so many reasons why things might be off for a month or two or even longer. And you need to be able to track that in one simple place. And how that then comes back into, I guess, moving into the next stage with how Inforcer can do this. Josh, you want to take over and talk through some of those security policies? And I think this is where we actually get some screenshots from Inforcer as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny you're bringing up some of the billing stuff, because, I mean, well, obviously it's what you do, right? But it's funny to me because literally this morning I ran into a situation where we had a billing mismatch on a bunch of the development tenants that we have that were locked out, and we didn't realize that a number of them we'd just been paying for is just completely empty. And it's, you know, it all adds up. It was, you know, something like 23 pounds or whatever it was, but times, I think, 13 tenants that were just idle, you know. It's just like, okay, well, you know, oops. So
yeah, you need to see that as money found in the future rather than dwell on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Our recommendation.
Exactly. I'll take the team out for dinner with the saved cash.
That's it, man. Every month.
Yeah. Well, hang on a second. Anyway, so yeah, let's get into what it is that we do here at Inforcer, which is fundamentally manage and monitor your security policies, but also tenant settings across all of your tenants. So if we can head over to the next slide here. I think it's important to kind of understand where you fit within the level of adoption and expertise with Microsoft, and it's okay to be honest with ourselves here. Anybody who tells me that they're an absolute expert in a particular subject, I tend to I tend to discount that a little bit. It's usually the people that know the most who are saying, well, I don't know everything. Anyway, but the right-hand side of this is kind of where I want to focus, and where probably most of the folks on this call are, which is they have pretty reasonable adoption. And the issue that they're running into either is that they well, take the bottom right corner, for example, low expertise but high adoption, right? This is where I think a big bulk of the MSPs lie, which is, hey, we know enough to manage 365. We know enough to administer it. We know enough how to harden and so forth. But there's so much more that's in there, right? Maybe we've specialized. We understand conditional access really well, but we're only starting to dip a toe into the waters of Intune, or maybe we've done a little bit with Defender, but we really haven't gone all in on it for each one of these clients. That's challenging, right? Again, because it's big and it's a moving target, Microsoft's changing all of these things. How do we help those people? Well, we help those people by we produce a lot of these baselines for you. So when you come on board with Enforcer, you're not starting from scratch. We have roughly 100 some odd policies that are exceptionally well documented. So we'll say, this is the policy, here's exactly what it does, here's exactly what the license requirement is on the tenant that you wish to apply it, and here's the exact CIS control to which it aligns along with the implementation group and links to further documentation. So very, very well organized. You can plug that stuff in on day one and get much, much further along than most of your peers will be. That's not to say that everything is plug and play. It's a journey, right? You're going to need to do some customization, and we will keep a lot of those things up to date for you. But it's a great place to get started, and we're building those out for other standards as well, like NIS2 and ISO 27001, so on and so forth. The other folks that we help are in the top right corner over there. Yeah, thanks. The people who have high levels of expertise and very high adoption within 365. So they've created their own policies, their own frameworks that they're aligned to. Everything is very, very bespoke. But when it comes time to make a change, let's say you're dealing with 150 tenants, that means you have to log in to 150 independent tenants in order to go and make that change. We are hooked into all of them simultaneously. So if there's something that you wish to change across them, it's quick, it's painless. It's very much like RMM for Microsoft 365. So let's go to the next slide here and talk a bit more about getting more out of Business Premium. And I think I've already hit on a lot of these points, so I won't spend too much time here since we're actually kind of running short on it. But the biggest things are for you to be thinking about are levels of expertise that are required in order to actually manage Microsoft. So if you're thinking about from a hiring perspective, I can find Microsoft specialists much, much more easily than I can find specialists for a lot of third-party products. The more people that are working within the Microsoft ecosystem, or there are a lot more people working within that ecosystem, I have a much, much easier time hiring for that than I do for whatever, specialist third-party tool we're dealing with. But furthermore, bringing everything under the umbrella of 365 just increases my operational efficiency, because I don't have to go and bounce around to a whole bunch of different tools. I'm not needing to stay up to date on a whole bunch of other kind of third-party specialty things and so on. So I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people underutilize Microsoft 365 is just initially it can be very complex. We've taken a lot of the complexity out of it for you. And then resource constraints, trying to go in tenant by tenant to manage it, very, very expensive, very, very time consuming, and also extraordinarily error prone. And
Josh,
that's
quick question. So is just for people listening on the call, and for myself as well, my own learning, if an end client has Business Premium, that immediately indicates that that's going to be a very good fit for an Enforcer implementation and setup, or
that's like right in our strike zone, right? Like those, because there's so much to do there. There's obviously everything within your conditional access with Intune, Defender, etc. Like there's just so much there to work on. We can plug into absolutely all of that. Now, there's plenty of people that aren't ready to take a bite at Intune or Defender or whatnot. And they're doing a lot with, say, Entra ID for conditional access, and they've added they're using business standard, and they've tacked on a P1 or a P2 license. We can absolutely work with that as well. What I usually tell people is whatever the tenants are licensed for with Microsoft, we can ingest all of those policies and settings, and we can standardize them across, whomever it is that you like.
Yeah, cool.
Yep. Okay, so again, we've talked a lot about this stuff, but I really want to harp on standardization, and I've got a screenshot here I'll show you right after this that goes into that. But when it comes to the process of like understanding what you have at your different tenants, I think that most people can relate to the idea of, I've set this one up today, my most recent tenant, and this encompasses all of my knowledge of 365 up to this point. This is my most secure, this is my most well managed, but it doesn't necessarily reflect those tenants that I had maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago. The visual analogy I usually give to people is, when you go into the server room right after the structured cabling guys have done their thing, and all the cabling, all that Cat5 is neatly bundled and just perfectly aligned into the switches, and it looks good. You know what everything is. What does it look like 2 years later, right? It's a rat's nest because, I'm moving things around. It's like I'm an old timey operator. I just like, you're just dealing with it in the moment, and your tenants are very much the same. So they drift naturally, either through Microsoft making changes or you making changes, businesses changing, so on and so forth. So that standardization is just kind of out the window. So we help to go and bring all of that under whatever standard you would like, so that ideal state. And that further drives your operational efficiency because you don't have questions about what the heck does this policy actually do. They're consistent across all the customers. And then from a visibility standpoint, actually, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide here, this is one of the very first things that happens as soon as you come into Enforcer. We'll connect through Partner Center. It's not a requirement, it's just a faster way to do it, but we'll connect with Partner Center and ingest all of those tenants and immediately show you, well, here's their secure score from Microsoft. And then here's their Enforcer alignment score. That's what you're seeing in the red and orange and green. And the alignment score means we have a baseline, right? This is the baseline that contains all of our policies and so forth. That's what the ideal state is. This is what we want them all to look like. So how closely do these tenants that I'm managing right now resemble that? You can see that one at the top, it's only 26% identical. A little further down, we've got 37% identical. And then what we're also showing you to the right of that, you see it's a little small on the screen, but changes since the last backup. We're capturing all of the tenant policies, all of the settings. We back them up on a daily basis, and we keep those. You can have a rolling 6-month window, or you can name backups and keep them in perpetuity if you ever need to revert. But we'll show you on a daily basis, well, what's changed? Did Adam go and exclude himself from an MFA policy because he was just trying to test something? Do we need to change that back? What does that actually look like? So instant visibility into the entire environment within just a couple of minutes of getting your credentials. And what we then do is start looking at how we want to align those policies. So we can do this in bulk, everybody all at once, copying a tenant essentially, or we use our tenant alignment tool to very surgically go in and say, all right, well, this policy has these minor differences, and that might be okay. Or, we want to go ahead and accept that as a deviation, and that's fine. Other times we might want to align it to the baseline, right? So what you're seeing on here is a conditional access policy of just named locations for where somebody is allowed to log in from, or where it's blocked, right? And what you're also seeing is where you see down where you've got similar policies. We analyze the contents of the policies and not just the names. So going back to my example of, tenants you may be configured a few years ago, or perhaps a different tech did it, or you inherited it from a prior MSP. Maybe they've completely changed the names of all these policies, and it does not match your documentation at all. I'm a huge ITIL nerd. I started my career working for one of the original authors of ITIL, and he just hammered all of this stuff into my head. And 20 plus years later, it's not coming out. But I believe everything should be standardized, as Adam was talking about, in terms of your naming conventions. So nobody's looking around and hunting, what the heck is this? Enforcer will look at the policies. Even if they're named something completely different, I can hit that rename to baseline button. It'll keep the settings because I might want those deviations in there, but it'll just give a consistent name across every single one of those tenants simultaneously based on the contents of those policies.
Yeah, super clever. Super
Yep.
clever.
Really cool. The other thing we're doing here now, if I want to go and deploy a brand new tenant, some of the polling that we've done of our customer base, average time to set up a brand new tenant in 365 is somewhere between 20 and 50 hours, depending on how much you're doing. If you're going to do, Intune as well as your conditional access policies. With Enforcer, it's 10 minutes. I go ahead and select which of my policies I want to push out. You see the neat, consistent, and documented naming conventions right there. Click, 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 push, done. And it doesn't matter if I do that to one tenant or 1,500. It's literally the same amount of work on my end. Right? And we've also got some clever tools that I'm not showing here that help us to standardize or genericize rather when it gets laid down to a new tenant. So doing things like importing domains or recreating groups to match identically and assigning them to policies. We can take you through that in a demo if you like. But how do people actually?
Yeah, I think this is super important. So how MSPs then take this stuff to market from an enforcer perspective. Yeah. Again, we reconcile this, we see this. And again, one of the reasons why we want to do this type of webinar is it's not 16% margin that these joint partners are making. It's way, way more than that. And you don't see that much from a vendor perspective these days. So how are some of the other partners you're working with actually taking this to market?
Yep, absolutely. So there's two ways to approach it. There's the decreased cost side, right? Like I was just talking about, hey, it's a few minutes to spin up a tenant. I get those 20, 30, 50 hours back and I can go do something more profitable with them. But the other way is increasing revenue, right? So we have people that are going and charging just a straight up backup and reporting fee for each of those tenants. So we'll capture all of the policies, all the settings. If, for example, you happen to get locked out of the tenant, not that anybody here would ever do that multiple times, we can go ahead and revert that without having to pay the time of the so-called Microsoft minute for them to unlock the tenant for us. The other thing that they're doing, the most successful MSPs are selling a packaged Microsoft 365 security service. So I will keep your secure score above this amount for $400 per month. Sometimes they'll do it as a additional $1 per user or $2 or something along those lines. It's a very, very easy sell when you're putting it like that.
Yeah, fantastic. So we'll fly through the last little bit. Just be mindful of time. We'll finish on the hour. But we talked about source of truth count from a revenue leakage. It really needs to come from the vendor side. The other piece of it is like source of truth. What's your customer expecting? So from their lens, the invoice is going to arrive and you want them to pay and not ask questions and not sort of have any diminishing trust that happens on it. Microsoft is so great for having the data of, say, 32 business premium as an example, which is just the gold package at the top. You can see on the right-hand side, we've got 32 business premium. If we invoice our client these other numbers, they may not ask questions because they're all lower, okay? But the expectation is that why haven't we got Datto SaaS across every single one of our humans, our users? And we know that there's 32. And likewise for these other potential products that are there. Okay, so again, coming back to the decision point, do you split them out for the invoice or do you have one line item? If you split them out, great. You'll be able to track your profitability. You'll be able to track more things. Your customer will see and they will likely have some questions on it. So being able to then go, right, if business premium is 32, these other things should also be 32 from a billing perspective, from a customer expectation perspective. It doesn't necessarily solve why have we under-deployed on some of our security products, different problem. The vendor side of things will pick that up that we talked about from the original source of truth count. How that then translate then is if you've got your different types of how you purchase your services, typically how you're buying and how you're selling. So a very common one is full user, light user, per device. You might have a per site. Like if you just group those services together from your relevant inside of your Auditask or ConnectWise, and then go for our light user, business basic is our driver of this. So our essential bundle should be in alignment. Or on the left-hand side, we've got, hey, if a end customer has E1 and E3 and business premium, we want to know the sum of those counts, which is why 3 toggles are on. That's 3 primaries effectively. Then everything else will fall in alignment. Or at least display to you and go, if 32, Are we under or overbilling? Is there a quality control issue that's happening in our business around offboarding? And this takes a couple of minutes to set up, do a quick refresh, and then all of a sudden you'll be displayed with areas where the secondaries, which is our terminology for things that should be in alignment with the primary count, are out of whack or out of sync. It's either fix them and bill them at the full amount and don't get questions back from the client, and or actually look at the overarching process of the offboarding typically and work out what's going awry, what's actually happening underneath it. So why is this so crucial? This firstly, you QA the distributor coming in. Again, if you've got sync set up, great, awesome. If you trust them, even better. If you've gone through the process of, which you totally should do on a periodic basis, work out, is it actually working the way that it's designed to? You really want to do that on a periodic basis. They can be the smallest of issues that arise monthly going to the wrong sales service, just as one tiny example of where you're not making the money that you should be. You also get to QA your technicians. Are things getting decommissioned? And then finally, actually thinking from a client's perspective, what do they expect to see on the invoice? The simpler we can make that, obviously the better for everyone, and it needs to happen every single month. So in our eyes, the more granular, the more control you have. Regardless of how you choose to bill your clients, whatever you use as a source of truth, be that we don't want to have revenue leakage, great. Be that actually we're going to manage the differences ourselves, but we're going to bill in a very consistent, standardized manner to our clients, great. The two go in lockstep, hand in hand, and you really want to be able to see both of them at the same time, because it tells a story as to what's going on in your business. The utopian state, which is super unrealistic, is that everything is in alignment. What your vendor costs are, everything's in alignment, means perfect deployment across all suppliers. And the Microsoft count for Microsoft really is the source of truth for the users, the humans at an end site. And that's what the end client's going to know. So coming back to the PSA accuracy, and I touched on the standardization. Down the bottom right is an example of a shorthand code or convention that can be used. We've got a much bigger blog on this that we can share with people afterwards. The whole idea behind this is that it includes the like Microsoft MS, Exchange Online Plan 2, shorthand, or extend that out, completely sort of up to yourself. And then it's got the commit and the billing frequency at the end. That little bit at the end allows you to then continually to tag things on as Microsoft if they evolve further. Okay. It also means that everybody in your company knows, and it's so much easier to reconcile back to how many annual monthlies, Exchange Online Plan 2 do we have, should we have? Do they match, yes or no? Okay. It's an example, which I'd really recommend if it's something that you've thought about adjusting in your own world. There's a blog that you can have a read in your own time. And then the last bit in terms of the lowest common denominator in our eyes is the end user at your client's site. Okay, so again, nearly always from Microsoft. If they buy direct or from another MSP, or for whatever reason, it's an internal admin at reception at, it's something that you do not want to constitute towards the count of the end client. Just having the most granular flexibility and intern control to be able to match whatever it is the client is expecting to their invoice, and away they go and ahead and bill. And of course, that can all be paired back and compared back to what's actually inside the vendor portal, etc. So in terms of a couple of QR codes from our side, if you have a distributor or even direct Microsoft, doesn't matter. If you would like to just have a sanity check on, is everything we're getting billed for? So the revenue leakage issue, if you want to solve that problem, or at least have oversight on it, right? We're happy to do that. QR code there, get in touch. We'll get that set up, full proof of concept, work through it, and at least you would be confident that everything's spot on moving forward. Okay. The other piece is, once you've got access to that, the groupings logic and the quality control around primaries and secondaries, we'll also set up those with you as well, and they can be used on into the future. So, Josh, do you want to work through what's in behind your one?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be real quick about it. Sign up for a trial with us. We can have your Enforcer environment provisioned and your tenants onboarded in just a couple of minutes. It's fast, it's easy. Immediately we start backing them up, and then we also have the ability for you to start reporting off of those straight away. So we have some great security assessment reports. Those are actually my favorite thing to do whenever we do a trial with somebody. Real brief story. I had an MSP I was working with who was very cocky about how secure their environment was and talking himself up and so forth. And we ran the security assessment report, and we got to the point where it identified these are all of the administrative users that don't have MFA, and he fell very silent. And he says, "I got to call you back. I don't recognize half these people." So, but anyway, quick, painless. You can generally get all of the features and so forth tested in the span of about 45 minutes or so, but we're happy to let you kick the tires for a week or two. No big deal.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Well, yeah, again, being respectful, we're right on the hour. So thanks everyone for your time. Appreciate jumping on as well, Josh. It was good to work with you on this and share the stage.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all very much. Listening to us ramble for a little bit about the stuff we deal with all day, every day. So cheers.
Cheers, guys.